Hey, this is Nate with Hebert Aviation. In this video, I'm going to show you how to remove the old pull-type starter from your Continental engine. In my case, I've got a Continental C85-12F engine. And then I'll show you how to prep the engine for installation of the new starter, and then install a lightweight B&C starter. I would also recommend, as always, make sure you follow the manufacturer's instructions, recommendations for this installation. So there are a lot of options out there for lightweight starters. I went ahead and went with the B&C starter for several reasons. Number one, it's a local company. I'm all about supporting local business. Number two, they have outstanding products that they build there. And number three, they have excellent customer service and engineering support. All right, so just a quick disclaimer before we begin. It's always a good idea to touch base with your A&P/IA mechanic before you start this installation. Just give them a heads up what you're thinking about doing if they have any recommendations. It is a major alteration, and so there'll be an FAA 337 form that will be required, and your IA will be signing that off. So there's been some discussion on this installation. What's the best way to go forward with it? Do you leave the engine on the airframe? Do you pull it off? Do you leave the accessory case on the back of the engine, or do you pull that off, right? I don't really want to get into a big debate. However, I will give you my opinion. Before I do that, I just wanted to say this engine is currently on a 1946 Cessna 140. That is the aircraft that I am doing a full restoration on. So it was my plan all along to pull the engine off and pull the engine all apart and replace all the seals and gaskets and everything. So I'd already planned on pulling it all apart anyways. When I did, I kind of timed myself just to see how long it would take to do all that work. So to pull the engine off the airframe, once again, this is a Cessna 140. To pull the engine off the airframe took about an hour, and then to pull the accessory case off the back end of the engine only took about 30 minutes. So about an hour and a half to have full access to the back of the engine. My opinion, why would you not just do that? So I've already done some of the work here. I'm going to walk you through the steps that I took so far. So number one, you want to pull the starter off. There's about maybe 3 nuts you pull off, pull a couple wires off, and here is the pull-type starter removed from the aircraft. Once you've got the starter removed, there's a starter gear cluster. It looks like that right there. That just simply pulls out of the engine as well. You can see mine, the teeth there are really worn out. It was time to replace that or just throw it away, right? Luckily, the gear inside the engine on the crank is good to go. So both the starter and this gear assembly can be discarded. Not going to need those. Now comes the fun part. So now we've got to cut that starter gear shaft off. This is where it's very beneficial to have the engine off the airframe and the accessory case off the engine because you want to have really good access to that shaft as you cut it off. So just a couple quick tips when cutting that shaft off. Number one, I would say try to cover the engine up as best you can with either a piece of plastic or speed tape or something like that. This will help minimize the amount of debris and FOD that could potentially get inside of the engine. Number two, you'll want to use like a hacksaw blade or a metal cutting type sawzall blade or something like that when cutting this shaft off. That will allow you to use a magnet, fish it around all over the place, make sure you get all the little chips and burrs out of the way so that there's no FOD or debris left in the engine. I would also warn you that this shaft is a very hardened steel shaft. It's difficult to cut it. It's really pretty tough to cut it, but it will cut and you'll be able to get it out of there. Okay, so I've got the starter gear shaft cut off. You can see it inside there missing. I've got the engine accessory case back on the engine block. The new gasket is in between there. And the last thing we need to do yet before we install the starter is make sure that from the cutoff shaft area to the flange where the starter sits, that measurement has to be at least 2.5 inches so that when the starter engages, it doesn't hit that cutoff shaft area. So I'm going to use a straight edge here to help me out. I know the thickness of the straight edge is 0.83. So the number I'm looking for on my calipers is going to be 2.583 minimum. So let's see if I can do this here one-handed. Do that. And we are at 2.625. So I know with confidence that when the starter engages, it will not hit that cutoff shaft. We're good to go. All right, so we are going back together with the engine here. It's mounted on the airframe again. It's coming along really nicely. You can see on the back side here, the starter is reinstalled. And there are two other components that need to be installed before you can motor the engine, and that is the starter switch, which is mounted in the instrument panel, easy installation, and then this starter relay mounted right here on the firewall. So just the one quick tip I would say there is make sure that when you mount that starter relay, you mount it in close enough proximity to the starter so that that wire is long enough to reach it. Now this engine hasn't been motored for about 20 years. It's been a while since it's flown, so this was pretty exciting to motor it for the first time. Here we go. All right, we're gonna attempt to motor the engine for the first time in about 20 years. So mags are off. Starter, here we go. Look at that. Yeah. All right, so it was a success. This project is done. Feels good. So, hey, if you got any other questions or comments for me, feel free to reach out to me. I'm on both Facebook and YouTube. Just simply search for Hebert Aviation. It's all one word. And there we are. Give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to us. If you've got any comments or questions, just feel free to throw those in there. Especially if you want to see some other part of this project, I'd be happy to make another video for you. So thanks for watching. See you next time.